Hello. So, a really quick introduction then to structured data, what it is, and why it's important, especially in terms of SEO. So, for us, let's just jump straight in. So, here's a definition from Google about what structured data is. It's a standardized format for providing information about a page and classifying the page content. So, just breaking that down, standardized format, they use something called schema.org. They don't use every bit of schema that is provided in schema.org. Google has a sort of a limited list. But by standardized, it's kind of like this third party or way of organizing data that lots of different people can use. But it's got that, standardization to it. It's an agreed format for providing the information, and it provides information about a page and classifying the page content. So what you're trying to do with Schema is to really pick out elements of the page and tell Google exactly what they are using this way of setting the formats. So that might be, for example, you can have structured data that is applied around your business. So your name, address, telephone number, things like that. We can apply this markup and instruct Google and explain to Google, okay, this is our name, here is our telephone number, and so on. And it takes some of the guesswork away from all the data that you've got on your page by using this structured format for it. Here is an example of some of the code that you could see in the HTML. So this would normally sit within the head of a HTML, and on here you can see, okay, we've got this is called JSON. The type of implementation. There are different ways of implementing structured data. I quite like this one. It's a very simple one. And it lists out things like type. Well, we're talking about a restaurant here. And then it names the restaurant, and it provides some images that are of that particular restaurant. It gives us a price range. We've got this serves cuisine piece of markup where it says Italian, and then it gives the address, the postal address, with streets, locality, region, postcode, and the country. And that is all information that Google can hoover up. It knows exactly what we're talking about here. It doesn't have to guess where this restaurant is because we know that it's in the US. We know its full address. It doesn't have to guess what kind of cuisine it serves because we've explicitly told it using structured data that it serves Italian cuisine. And you can do this for many different types of offering. So this is just one for a restaurant, and there are more things that you could add to this. This is simply Google's example of how you can use structured data for a restaurant. Something important to raise right now. So structured data elements of that can appear in search results. So when you type for a Italian restaurant, it may pull out certain features that you have highlighted in those search results. But Google does not guarantee that even if you mark your page up with all manner of wonderful pieces of structured data, that it will actually use them or directly use them in search results. So there are things like review ratings that you can mark up so you can get those stars in the search results. And some clients will say, well, I've done that, my stars still don't appear. Well, Google doesn't guarantee that they're going to use them. So you might implement everything correctly and Google might not actually feature them in search results. Whether that means that Google isn't using them at all is another matter. But yeah, so important thing to know when you're dealing with structured data. Might not always have the effect that you were hoping for. So, how do we test and audit? Well, we use something called the Google Schema test tool, which we'll come to in a moment. It's really easy to use. You just drop in the URL that you want to look at to see if it's got any structured data already in place. So we can test a client site and say, well, you've got no structured data on there, but that's not necessarily the most helpful endpoint. I would also go and look at competitors and see what they're doing and get some inspiration from them as to what kind of structured data is useful in that particular industry and marketplace. There's also some common ones that everybody should use. And you'll get to know a bit more about that from experience. But the biggest one is probably business. So things like your name, address, telephone number, and what it is that you actually do for the website. That should be common on every website. And we can check Google's schema list. So this is, like I said, schema.org has tons and tons of schema because it's not just used for this. Well, I mean, it can be used for things like databases. It's a really good markup structure. But search engines don't necessarily use it all. So if you use the Google schema list, that will show you the things that Google explicitly say, yes, that we use these particular schemas. And hopefully the next slide, yes, here we go. There'll be a link of this in the comments on the video. So this is a published list by Google that says these are the features that use structured data, and you can click into each of these and it will give you more information about what they're looking for. And you can see things like here we've got recipe. So you can mark up if you've got, say, a blog post and it's got a recipe on it, you can mark up the ingredients on that recipe, things like cooking times, and all sorts of things like that that you can mark your recipe blog post up with. And it gives Google so much more information, or quick and easy access to that information than just writing a blog post with your recipe. Things like FAQ are in here, so you can actually mark up if you have a FAQ. You can mark the part that is a question and the part that is an answer. So again, you're just guiding Google and saying, here's the question, here's the answer to that. And if you imagine a list of all those, it makes it really easy for Google to say, okay, a user has searched for this particular question. It's marked up. I know that it matches the question in this markup, and I know explicitly what the answer to that is because I've marked up the answer as well. Things like breadcrumbs, so that's partly navigation, that we can mark that up so that Google knows that it's breadcrumbs and how that kind of sits in a hierarchy. And they add, I don't think they've ever removed anything from this list, but obviously they've added things like COVID-19 announcements because that became really important to have on your website. So they added the ability to say, yes, this is our COVID-19 announcement about, whether we're open and, what services are available to customers. So loads in there is really useful to go and have a look at. And here is the rich results testing tool. So this is going to look at, if we type into this, enter a URL to test, put in any URL, so clients, competitors, whatever you want, and it will go away and it will look for any structured data that is found on the page that it could use for rich results. And so by that we mean when you search in Google, whether it will actually use some of those things and add it as a feature in the results. Like I said, the stars, reviews, things like that, breadcrumbs come up in search results. So we just type a URL into there, and this is the kind of output that we get. So I've used Miller and Carter, and it tells me that, okay, here's the it kind of pulls out all the structured data, and on the left hand side here you can see it's quite neat. On the right hand side you can see the actual code that they've got in the HTML. and how it's marked up and how it's delivered. Um, really, really useful tool, this. So we can see at the top here, we've got type restaurant. So we've already established what Miller and Carter is. We've got telephone number, accepts reservations, true. So Google now know, yes, you can reserve a seat here. We've got the address, postcode, blah, blah, blah. We've also got geo coordinates, so that's obviously helping for with maps, Google Maps, and everything. Loads of data that Miller and Carter have got in here that just means that it's so quick and easy for Google to access that information, and it doesn't then need to just read through your page that the user can see, and try and pick those elements out one by one, and at times have to guess. Imagine if you had two addresses for some reason on the page. You might have the kind of the overall business address, but you've also got this particular restaurant at the hedgerow in Leeds. Now, it might have to guess as to which address you're really talking about, but by using this schema markup, you can direct Google towards the right telephone number, towards the right address, and so on. It takes all that guesswork away from Google. And I think that was the last slide. Going back, so what I would do if I was testing and auditing a website, I would put in a competitor. So if I'm thinking about a restaurant that I wish to have structured data, and let's say they've got nothing, so that's not a great starting point, I would look at competitors. I would see what they do. I would take the best things that they do, because not everything is going to be suitable for my restaurant, and they might not have done everything perfectly. But in terms of delivery, which is why I've come back to this particular slide, just saying to somebody you have no structured data isn't good enough in terms of an audit and delivery. What we need to be doing is telling people exactly what we want them to feature. And I'll probably do another short video on that and introduce you to tools where we can actually build this structured data and really get into which elements we need to submit to Google to help us feature better in search results. Ideally, what we do is we give them the code that we just want them to put into the head of their website. That is the ideal and simplest solution that we can offer. I have seen at times where where audits just highlight you don't use any schema. And I think a lot of this gets, the complexity of it. We should really be guiding people and telling them explicitly which schema they should use, which bits. I realize that I've used words, things like schema and structured data, very, two different words to use, but meaning the same thing, or we mean the same thing when we're using that. Same with rich media. So that terminology can sometimes be confusing because we flip between one or the other. And I'm sure if we start using schema for something else, like I said, you can use it for database content, that we would have to start being tighter with that language. But as it stands, we use schema as part of structured data for rich results, and that's why it's called rich media as well. So one final thing, just an example. I can't give you examples of everywhere that they use structured data. It would take me a while to run through, but here's just one for recipes. So you've got here things like the reviews, number of reviews, the star rating. You've got the time that it takes to cook this recipe, 1 hour 30 minutes, and you've got the number of calories in this recipe as well. Obviously, we've got the title and so on. All of these things have been marked up with structured data. So Google has been able to pull them all out, and it's been able to serve them up, no pun intended, talking about recipes, in the search results itself. Um, and that can be done if you think about any product and its price and its rating, and so on and so on and so on. So, anywhere where you see these little elements being pulled into search results, more often than not, it's because they've been marked up with structured data. So that's just an example, which I thought probably should have included in the main part of that presentation. Thank you.